Hello, BookTube. I've got a little mail for you today on a bitterly cold day here in Boston. It's the daytime high temperature with the sun beaming down is not going to be anywhere near freezing on the Fahrenheit scale. We're talking 15, 16, 19 degrees. Bitterly, bitterly cold. The type of thing where you go out for a dog walk and you can't ignore it. It has to become a determining factor in the dog walk. That's how bad it is. So Frida and I have shifted from a few long walks to a great many short walks. It's not satisfying for her or me. But the temperature is supposed to go up by 10 degrees tomorrow, then 10 more degrees the next day, then 10 more degrees the day after that. By the end of the week, we'll be in the high 50s Fahrenheit. So I guess I can live through this. I guess I can. I'm making sure to leave lots of food in the back for the squirrels and the raccoons tonight, and lots of food in the front for the sparrows. And they have to fend for themselves in terms of getting through the night without freezing to death. I think the sparrows will be okay because they live in the wainscoting. So the back wall of where they live is heated by the house. So I'm pretty sure they'll be okay. I can't say anything for their brethren that live in low-lying bushes and low-lying shrubbery along the street. I know plenty of those habitats. Don't know how they get through nights like this. Really don't. Because predators are still out. My sparrows in the wainscoting are not vulnerable to predators. The only thing they're vulnerable to is marauding other sparrows. Sparrows that want to take over that area. But no cat can get in there. No squirrel can get in there. So they're safe except from the cold. We just have to get through that, and then the temperature's just going to go steadily up. In case any of you are wondering why there have been no Brattle book hauls lately, that is the reason. Because the days when I could go to the Brattle and stand in the outside lot when it was 20 degrees and just shrug it off, I'm afraid those days might be over. If they're not over, I don't want to push it anyway. I have enough books. But I want to make this mail haul a little bit chippy, a little bit on the chipper side, because yesterday's videos were all doom and gloom. They were all crabby and grumpy. So let's see. We have 2 periodicals and 2 packages. We don't have to make this a long one. The first periodical is the Martha's Vineyard Gazette. And as you can see, the vineyard was battered by storms just recently, and that makes the headline for the front of the paper, because the vineyard it's an island off the coast of Massachusetts, and it has some portions of it, some beaches, that can be just broken by one severe storm after another. Storm surges after another can just break a beach. Then suddenly a sprit of land that has been part of the vineyard for the last 100 years is suddenly its own little island. Suddenly that break becomes real, and it doesn't heal when the storms stop. So everybody keeps an eye on that, on whether or not they do the same thing on Cape Cod. They keep an eye for breaks. So there was that. There was also the New York Review of Books. And today, a little bit thinner issue here that haven't really looked to see what's in here. I'm always interested in seeing if anything is going to review a book that I've reviewed, but I also look for things that will be of interest to me. The lead-off thing is Philip Clark reviewing Bradley Cooper's movie Maestro, in which he plays Leonard Bernstein. And he has been doing press for that movie and lying his face off about it, just saying, I've been struck by the drama of Bernstein, the great conductor, Leonard Bernstein. I've been struck by the drama of his story forever and ever. I've always wanted to bring this story to the big screen, so have all the people that are involved in this project, etc., 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 etc. The movie that so far as I can see, at least so far as I can see, $5.1 million of its budget was provided through a shadow company of R.J. Reynolds, a gigantic tobacco company. And that's no accident. The only reason that Bradley Cooper made this movie is so that he could smoke incessantly on screen. That's the one thing he knew about Bernstein. Is the one thing you could not get away from. I guarantee you, almost beyond a shadow of a doubt, that every major Bradley Cooper movie that he makes for the rest of his life until he dies of lung cancer at age 57 will have that in common. If it's a biopic, it will be a biopic of someone who is known at least as much for chain smoking as for anything else. So we could probably guess who the next one will be. What the next movie will be. You can probably guess. You just have to picture a figure. If you know anything about Lenny Bernstein, you know that. When you picture him in black and white, yes, but you also picture him smoking. In fact, let's see, 10-1. The article has a picture of him, and 10-1. Okay, that's a black and white picture of Leonard Bernstein. That is, I guarantee you that the long simmering passion project that Bradley Cooper has been lying about is that. And the movie is financed by that. That $5.1 million was the only thing that I bothered to find. There are other shadow companies. They're fairly well known. I'd be willing to bet that a third of this thing's budget was provided by the drug for which it is a commercial, for which it is a 2-hour commercial. Don't get me started about Oppenheimer. It's just, but anyway, do you have anything of interest here? David Cole reviews a book on cancel culture. Brenda Wineapple has a piece in here that's always worthwhile. Ben Lerner is in here. We just read about him yesterday. A lot of great. Oh, Peter Brown, fantastic. Oh man, there's an exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City called Africa and Byzantium. Never going to see it. I would go in a heartbeat if I was still within range of Met exhibits. I would go in a heartbeat. But they got Peter Brown to review it. That is great. That is fantastic. Jeffrey O'Brien does a roundup. The New York Review of Books look like there are a few roundups here. They are when an editor gets to commission a number of books for one piece by one reviewer. Roundups are great for book section editors because they're all tormented by how many books they're not covering. They're all tormented by that. They might act like they're not, but the good ones are all tormented by that. So if it's possible to double or to even triple up, it's a lot to ask of a reviewer. Not many reviewers can do it because you've got to remember to review the books in addition to everything else. In the New York Review of Books or in the London Review of Books or something like that, it's going to be easier because the person has thousands of words. Much harder to find what I call a newspaper reviewer, someone who has at most 800 words, to do multiple books in a roundup and do them all justice. That is very hard to do. The times when I have commissioned such things, almost always I end up telling the writer, I'm sorry, I'm not going to use this because I'm out of time. So there's no time for you to redo it, but you did not review the books. You instead discussed their common subject matter. That's not the same thing. Maybe that'll work in a think piece for the New York Review of Books, but it won't work in a review. In a workaday newspaper review, you have to give the customer what they need, and they need a review of the book. You can't just discuss the subject matter. So it's really hard to do. I had an editor once for the Christian Science Monitor here in Boston. I used to delight her because I love doing roundups. And I did remember to review the books. I did roundups for her that she could use, including an epic roundup where I reviewed 10 presidential biographies in one piece. One newspaper-sized piece. I didn't have 3,000 words. But there's Jeffrey O'Brien does a roundup of books about murder mysteries. Oh, that's going to be great. That's going to be fantastic. Okay, so those are the periodicals. And now we'll do the books. And we'll remember to be happy, to be peppy and upbeat. That's what we'll try and remember to do. Because yesterday we had a bit of a psychodrama going on here. Okay. All right, great. So this comes out in May. And this is by Sarah Franklin, and it's called The Editor: How Publishing Legend Judith Jones Shaped Culture in America. What a cover. There you have her authors just barely peeking out at you along the side there. No sheet in you? No sheet. Okay. When 25-year-old Judith Jones began working as a secretary at Doubleday's newly opened Paris office in 1949, she was tasked with wading through manuscripts in the slush pile until one caught her eye. What I wouldn't give to have that job. I don't know that I would give up other jobs to do it, but what I wouldn't give to have that job. She read the book in one sitting, then begged her boss to consider publishing it. A year later, Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, became a bestseller. It was the start of a culture-defining career in publishing. This is a career in publishing memoir, a biography. Over more than half a century as an editor at Knopf, Jones became a legend, nurturing future literary icons such as Sylvia Plath, Ann Tyler, and John Updike. At the forefront of the cookbook revolution, she published the who's who of food writing: Edna Lewis, MFK Fisher, Claudia Roden, Madhur Jaffrey, James Beard, and, most famously, Julia Child. Jones celebrated the art and pleasures of cooking and culinary diversity, forever changing the way Americans think about food. Her work spanned the decades of America's most dramatic cultural change, from the end of World War II through the Cold War, and from the Civil Rights Movement to the fight for women's equality. Her work questioned convention, using books as a tool of quiet resistance. Now, her astonishing career is explored for the first time. This is the first biography. Based on exclusive interviews, never-before-seen personal papers, and years of research, this book tells the riveting behind-the-scenes narrative of how stories are made, finally bringing to light the audacious life of one of the most influential tastemakers. Great. Absolutely great. I've read a whole bunch of these kinds of things. I wish there were more of them. Every book that you see in a bookstore has a story like this behind it. Fantastic. especially since I've never read a biography of this person before. That's going to make it even better. All right, so I won't get to it until later on. I'm not going to read it now, but great, fantastic. Put it on your list. You're going to love it, even if, who is this author? Sarah Franklin, writer, teacher, and oral historian. She received a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and she teaches courses on food, writing, embodied culture, and oral history in New York. PhD in food studies from NYU, hence all this mention of food, hence the emphasis on Jones's concentration on cookbooks. She's the author of this book and the editor, the co-author of something called the Phoenicia Diner Cookbook, and the editor of a book called Edna Lewis. So it may be that this is her first standalone book of her own. That'd be something if this is a nonfiction debut. But I'll get to it. I won't get to it right away, but I will get to it. I'm glad to have it there. So definitely, if you're interested, and believe me, if you're interested in books, you are, get onto your library. Make sure they get a copy or 2 copies. Make sure they get a copy for you. Maybe pre-order if you're feeling flush. But then we'll do this. The second package is a box. And then we'll be done. And we'll try not to have any kind of you again. I'll try not to do anything like that. We'll try just to have a happy encounter with this next book. It's really big, whatever it is. Ooh, gross. It's an invoice. Gross. Ooh. All right, this comes out at the end of July. This is the latest, the furthest ahead book that I have. But an author with a lot of credit in the bank of Steve, and this thing is huge. Do you tell me how big you are? You come out on July 16th. Did you have the pages numbered yet? Yeah, this is almost 700 pages. This is The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman, the author of The Magicians. And it calls itself a novel of King Arthur. So there are a couple of fans out there. I know there are a couple of big fans of Arthurian fiction. Wow, this is a huge thing. Probably the biggest Arthurian fiction that's coming out this year. Let's see here. A gifted young knight named Colum arrives at Camelot to compete for the spot on the Round Table, but he's too late. King Arthur died 2 weeks ago at the Battle of Camlan, leaving no heir. Only a handful of knights of the Round Table survive. They aren't the heroes of legend like Lancelot or Gawain. They're the oddballs of the Round Table, from the edges of the story like Sir Palomedes. Any of you once and future King fans out there. The Saracen Knight, and Sir Dragonet, Arthur's fool, who was knighted as a joke. They're joined by Nimue, who was Merlin's apprentice until she turned on him and buried him under a hill. We're not supposed to like her, are we? Together, this ragtag fellowship will set out to rebuild Camelot in a world that has lost its balance. God has abandoned Britain. The fairies and monsters and old gods are returning, led by Morgan Le Fay, and rival factions are forming around the disgraced Lancelot and the fallen Queen Guinevere. It's up to Colum and his companions to reclaim Excalibur and make this ruined world whole again. But first they'll have to face the truth of why the lonely, brilliant Arthur fell. I am loving this. Absolutely loving this. I say there are booktubers out there who are huge fans of Arthur, anything Arthurian. They'll go for anything Arthurian. I know that, for instance, Tony at An Erudite Adventure has a sweet spot for anything Arthurian. I'm pretty sure that David Wiley does too. I always say that, outsourcing the wonder, as it were. But I am a big Arthurian fan myself. I've done a starter kit on the subject, and I've been reading it forever, and I am in love. Already I am in love with this. The first major Arthurian epic of the new millennium. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. We can't count Giles Christian, can we? Or can we? I don't know. The Bright Sword is steeped in tradition, full of duels and quests, magic swords, and fisher kings. It also sheds a fresh light on Arthur's Britain, a complex nation struggling to come to terms with its bloody history. This book is a story about imperfect men and women who must reforge a broken land in spite of being broken themselves. Oh, man. Okay, so a huge work of Arthurian fiction by an author I love, an author who's not going to let me down, and a biography set in the publishing world. All right, so I was thinking, when I started this mail haul, I was thinking, no matter what, you really have to work to be pleased. You have to work to be friendly and happy and upbeat. I don't have to do any work. This is about as good as 2 books can get. So there you go. That is your mail for this freezing cold day. Every day after this is going to be warmer. So you're going to get fewer and fewer complaints about that. And once it gets warm enough so that I'm not freezing my giblets off, I will return to the Brattle and get more books that I don't need. But in the meantime, I'm going to go and huddle with the bean under a blanket. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.